Okay, and that is it. We are live. So I am joined here by with my friend Ben, and our friend Nico is a bit of a ghost right now, so we're kind of hoping he shows up soon. But we are here today because we wanted to chat about these books. This is called the Book of Astea. It was written by some dude named Zamar Ekmer. I don't really know who this guy is. No one even knows how to say his name, actually. No, no, I'm joking, of course. These are of course, the books that I wrote, and it is one of the greatest pleasures and honors of my recent authorial career, I should say, to have two of my really good friends, Ben and Niko, like they did me the honors of reading my books. And so I was like, you guys are not getting away from this without like sitting down and talking to me about what's going on and your thoughts. And I just want to hear everything that you thought about it. So yeah, that's what we're here for. And sounds like Niko should be joining us pretty soon. So Ben, how's it going?
Oh, it's going good. It's going good. Being able to chat about fantasy and books and other worlds is a pleasure right now to escape. So I am thrilled to be able to chat about your books. I'm astounded. Like you are a generational peer of mine and a friend, and we've read a lot of books together, chatted about books. The fact that you could create these is astounding to me. I don't have creative aspirations, so like it's just wild. I'm reading this and going like, wow, he was able to come up with these characters and this really ingenious world building and like I was just proud of my friend that as I was reading that you're able to create something so complex in this really epic scale fantasy series and story and pull it off so elegantly in just 2 volumes. I know we have a prequel novella here, but
Mm-hmm.
for a complete whole high stakes fantasy tale to be wrapped up in just these 2 short volumes, I mean that is just so impressive to me. It didn't feel underdeveloped, didn't feel undercooked. I read a trilogy recently, the Red Winter Chronicles, where it felt that way. It was 3 slim books. Felt like it could have used a bunch more books to really flesh out, but I feel like this told a satisfying tale, and I loved the discovering of the mysteries and lore that we get in book 2 to help recontextualize, the world and everything that I started with in book 1 and feeling mysterious, um, and so that was really cool because the the way the plotting resolves and the lore reveals happen in book 2, it felt like, man, this is some high quality fantasy architecture, like on par with Sanderson and the Mistborn trilogy, like the way that the reveals happen and recontextualize what came before. So, man, I was blown away by what you were able to accomplish here. So,
See,
kudos, my friend.
he's saying so many nice things, and I don't know what to say back. I'm like, oh god.
I
I made
did you write these with the like as like a personal passion project for yourself, or did you write them wanting to like release them to the world?
I did not even think about publishing until
Oh,
like after I'd finished I think after I finished my first draft, or it was like close to the end of the first draft. I was like, wow, I put a lot of time and work into throwing these pages or throwing these words at like this page. And it's kind of like, I guess I should put it out there and maybe someone will read it. So like I genuinely did not go into this expecting anything, to be honest. It was just like um, I just got this kernel of a story in my head and kind of became a little bit of an obsession. You know, like I'm at work, I'm in meetings, and instead of paying attention in meetings, I'm actually just daydreaming about this random world and these characters. And it's like I guess the way I write, like my writing process kind of developed over the course of writing these and like everything I've done afterwards. So these are not even the first book that I've written because I did write like this other book, which is kind of a trunk novel, which is not that good, but like even in that case, it was kind of like I just wrote because I wanted to write, and then the same with this one. But then this one, it felt like this was kind of good enough that maybe I could publish it. You know, like maybe if I get it polished, I get it like fully edited, kind of go through that process. I wanted to push myself to do that. And yeah, like once you put like all that effort in, it's kind of just really exciting to share it with people as well. So that's more or less the way I went about it. And I don't know, I think I mentioned this to you before, but it's like for me, writing is probably the absolute most immersive form of storytelling.
Mm.
Like when I'm writing a book, I'm really living it. Like I'm living in the world, and like it. Even though like you can kind of like sit there and create the world as you're going, at the same time, it's like it just feels more immersive than any other experience I've had with insofar as reading or watching TV shows or anything. So yeah, that's more or less.
I mean, that's cool to think about. As even if I'd have to come up with an idea to even do writing for fun as a hobby, but the idea of being even more immersed in story than I am as a reader is really cool to think about. And I could picture that being the case, because you are crafting everything from the inside out. You're not just seeing it kind of from the outside. Although as a reader, you are kind of visualizing and creating along with the author. So it is, I think, more active immersion than watching a movie or TV show. But yeah, it's cool to imagine just like being in that flow state of creating, and it being a rewarding experience, and not just like something that is like tragically just like banging your head against the wall kind of thing to get ideas out. Like think about it as like fun and enriching. Like that's so cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think the way I approach it is like and kind of one of the things I've learned with these books too is I would not start writing any book unless like it felt like I had to write it. Like it's like this deep seated impulse in me. Like I can't stop thinking about this stupid story, and then going through the process of writing it is kind of how I live that story. Because like even though, like I mentioned, I'm thinking of all these specific scenes and I'm like obsessed with these scenes, but it's hard to just visualize an entire book in your head. But the way that like going through that process of writing it, that kind of lets you live the entire story, I guess.
Did you kind of pants this whole thing, and then kind of put together some interlocking pieces as you went, or did you plan out a lot of the overarching plotting? Because it's non-linear storytelling in the first book, so it feels like that either required a lot of planning or like maybe revision and editing on the back end. But I'm a little bit curious about this, because like it does not seem just like random stuff going from chapter to chapter, book 1 to book 2. Like it all really fits together in the end. It's like it feels like there's a lot of intentionality in the plotting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very glad you say that, because like I very much pantsed it, man. I was like hanging up on this. I mean, I think that's just like for me, like I was mentioning, like just the process of writing is the process of like experiencing the story. So like I have tried plotting, and it just feels like it kind of takes the fun out of it. It's probably smarter if you're doing like a very long series and you're doing a lot of world building, but for me it's like the moment to moment of writing scenes, and you're in there and then you're like, oh, what if this happened, and then oh, now I see, and then as you're writing it you're making connections in your head, and then it's like by the time you finish the book, then you're like, okay, now I understand the story. And then you go back to the beginning, and it's like, okay, now I have to make it all cohesive, and that's like the great project of writing. So
That
John,
does make a certain kind of sense to me. I could picture that. I think that's what I would be if I were a writer, because the idea of doing what Sanderson does, of just like the detailed outline first, seems very clinical, and for him that works. But and I know he finds joy in trying to execute that outline, and then things surprise him at that stage where he's trying to write out the chapters and maybe characters are surprising him. So I know plotters find inspiration in other places maybe.
Yeah, I mean, and like the approach is different, because he approaches as like a a professional with a huge audience, and like he's got a big business to run and all that stuff, and like maybe that way of like plotting and stuff and staying organized, like he plots not just one book, like he's plotting his entire Cosmere universe,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's way bigger. Like I couldn't do a project like that. Even like I would have to plot stuff if you're doing a project like that, I think. And that's why kind of this duology kind of fits my style, I think. I just, yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing. It's just, it is what it is. I just don't have the patience for it. Because for me, I feel like if I sat down and went through like I went and wrote an entire plot, then like, what's even the story I'm trying to tell anymore? Hey, there's Niko. How's it going, buddy?
Hello. It's been a day, but I think the baby is finally asleep, so hopefully she'll stay asleep. So
Well, if you have to talk quietly, go for it. We can hear you just fine over there. Man, I joked to Zamar before, like we don't have kids. I don't know how people with kids have time for anything in life, because I barely have free time at all. And so kudos to you for trying to balance so many plates in the air, and hopefully this could be a little fun and escape from everything for a little bit in the evening.
yeah, normally 7:30 is like her absolute latest bedtime. So I'm like, oh, this will be fine. But she was home sick today and was screaming for about 90% of the day,
Oh,
and then decided to take 45 minutes to fall asleep.
oh,
So, so
oh,
that's where,
sorry
yeah,
about
I'm
that.
like, I didn't even realize what time it was, to be honest. And I saw the message. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm very late. But yeah, no. So I'm here now, and I have books.
Yeah, right.
You guys get
Ooh,
fake background though, because I didn't have a chance to set up the real background.
that's
So
so funny that you took a picture of your
I was gonna say
normal
that's
bookshelf.
crazy.
You took a picture of your
I
normal bookshelf background. That's a
I
great
don't
idea. I should do that. I should do
I don't even remember what this picture was for, but I was on a live one time sitting at my desk, not with my background, and I'm like, I have a picture of my bookshelf. Why not? And so yeah, so now as needed, I have my fake
that. Oh,
background, which is the same as my real background.
yeah, yeah. Oh, that's a great idea for me in case I ever need to deploy it. I gotta steal that idea. But
Yeah, it's really
welcome,
confusing.
welcome. And I before you got here, I started with just a little bit of high praise for just what Zamar was able to accomplish with these books and telling such a high stakes, dramatic fantasy epic tale in too slim for epic fantasy books, and for it to feel like a complete story, not undercooked, not underdeveloped. Really impressive too with how many POVs there were. Just so many things I was impressed with for Zamar. So I don't know if you wanted to start out with kind of what your thoughts were on the series or
Yeah,
anything there.
I have to. I'm halfway through editing my series review, which will be out Friday.
Ooh.
um, which is like 20 minutes long. But I always have to mention the covers because I just love the covers so much.
Oh yeah.
Whole reason I picked up the series. I'm really glad I ended up liking it. But Zamar, like few series have I started reading where I'm just multiple times I'm like, oh no, am I gonna hate this? Because like the whole Joe Abercrombie thing, which I joked about, I'm not much of an Abercrombie fan. I started seeing that early on, like the influence, and I'm like, oh no. But then I ended up, it worked anyway. And then I pick up book two and I start reading and I'm like, wait a minute, this is a duology? I'm like, how on earth is he going to end this in this short book? And I saw at first I'm like, I don't know. But it ended up working out really well. And then it's like then use this one, the cozy grimdark, and I'm just like, I don't really like cozy. How's this one gonna go? And pretty good too. I mean, like, so this has been. I've enjoyed all of the books, and yeah, the amount of stuff you fit into the two, with like the prequel being sort of just like a bonus too. Like it's really good after reading the series, but you don't have to read it. Like it's not like, oh well, you need this because I didn't have time to do this. It's like, no, here's even more. So very impressed to have a quick reading duology got the kind of world building I love, where it's very intricate and all of the different creatures, while also having a very character focused and nuanced story with just commentary in spades, while also never coming off preachy. So you toe the line with a lot of things really, really well. And so yeah, I had a really great time with these.
By the way, Zamar's idea of cozy is probably not most people's idea of cozy. I've started the novella, and granted, I haven't even gotten halfway, but it's been pretty dramatic and tense. So, like, Zamar's cozy has to be taken with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I mean,
and yeah,
cozy is a relative term, isn't it?
You'll see too. It's there are definitely parts that feel kind of cozy, but it's also tragic because you're like, I know what happens later.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like the whole book, even the coziest parts have this undertone of like, yeah, but what's gonna happen in the main series is, and so it's a really fascinating way to do that, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I think like, first of all, thanks so much, like, both of you guys. It means the world. Like, just putting these books out there, it was just a matter of like, my friends read them, and like, if they enjoy them, then I'm happy with what I accomplished. And it's extra funny because, like, Niko and I feel like we don't have, like, Ben and I have a pretty similar taste. Like, we align on a lot of series, on a lot of books. But then Niko and I, we have some major differences. I think, like you mentioned, the Abercrombie thing is a big one. You don't like a bunch of pop books, which I like, and there's several things, and it feels like the core of it is just that you are more of a world building person than I am, probably, and I'm more of a cynical.
Just the last 7. The first 9 are great. I'm just giving you crap. No,
Yeah. So I mean, it was like super cool because, like, when you were reading it, I'm thinking, oh man, there's no way Niko's gonna like my book. There's just no way on earth.
I mean, you go heavy on just your own world building. Like, a lot of people just stick with Earth-based, ecology and animals and geography is just like, related to Earth, or not too intricate, but you build out your whole alternate world with a lot going on, and you don't hold the reader's hand either. So it's not like lots of exposition to help you understand how things are set up. So you really did a great job of being organic to the POVs, because with people who are middle-aged characters or older or young adults, like, they've been living in this world for many years, many decades. In some cases, they're not going to be having all these expositional thoughts about the world that a lot of authors I see do. That really annoys me, where it's like really clunkily introducing the world to the reader, but it is immediately kicks me out if I feel like these aren't organic thoughts for this person to be having in their internal monologue. And it's one of my real high praise things for you, is that I felt like you had really good control of your POVs, where they were having organic thoughts and not all these other thoughts to like help situate the reader more easily, which has the drawback of like, a lot of this book 1, and we're jumping forward and back in time a lot, like, I didn't feel terribly grounded in it. I really felt like wasn't until late in book 1 where I had more of a solid grasp on the world and the situation, and so that's a choice that I respected, because it doesn't make accessing this just like super easy from the start, but it pays off, because by the time you're in book 2, I think you're learning more of the lore, and it's just easier to be immersed in it, and so it had big payoffs.
Yeah, it is always a risk because you're asking readers to trust you. I think with that, like, if you're trying to stay with a very character close narrative and you're using an alternate world, which by default is pretty ungrounded, it's not like whatever traditional medieval fantasy. Yeah, for me, I think, like, The funny thing is, a lot of people have said nice things about the world building in my books, but it's one of the things which I probably care the least about when I'm writing and when I'm reading. I'm sorry, because like for me, the world building thing is like a lot of the time I'll start reading a book and you just get dumps of information, and it's like, okay, like I get it, you made a cool magic system, like whatever, just give me a story now, right? Or you made like, okay, there's all these different people and tribes, and it's all just kind of going over my head. So it's hard to like, I guess the challenge I put to myself was like to integrate the world building really deeply into the plot and the thematic elements of the book, and then also for the characters, and to always maintain a sense of closeness to the characters so that readers are able to experience the world with them. And again, that's where the challenge of like trying to ground the readers while you do that comes about.
Well, and that's what's funny, because this is definitely, especially with book one, it's one of those things that I like it for very different reasons than most of your core audience probably would. Because I was joking, because Esme, who really enjoyed these, we have like polar opposite taste. And so this is one of the few things that we've actually both liked.
Oh, wow.
But the reason she likes it entirely different than the reasons I like it. She likes the character focused grimdark. I'm like, yeah, the world's really cool though. Like the characters are fine. Like they grew on me eventually. But so I think that the way you did it, and maybe it was because you were just like, you knew you had to do it, but wanted to do it as little as possible. Like it worked for me, because there were so many cool things that were teased that immediately, and like the prologue, my imagination is the wheels turning. And you used so many like pieces of tropes and things, but in very different ways. And that's kind of with so much of the world building. It's the understated feel of it. I think that works, because you set up. You're like, oh, we have a moon god and a sun god and an earth god. Okay, yeah, I've seen that a million times. Like, yeah, but not the way that it's in here. And so that's kind of, you make it really different, and you make it more about the different characters and the different races and creatures, and you just sort of organically have it. And it is harder to do that. And I've read a few other books that have done that, where it's just like everything in this world is different, and it just kind of is. But if you can pull it off, it works really, really well, especially for a world building focused reader like me. And so, wow, like there were some characters, because I commented in my review too, the characters that I hated the most, or like just least was engaged in with book one, I was the most engaged in book two, which was interesting.
Ooh.
Because I'm just like, man, there were a couple of POVs where I'm just like, yeah, I don't like you, which I think is kind of the point though, because the characters are the ones that aren't very likable.
We gotta talk some
two, I'm like,
spoilers.
oh, it's so
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah,
After we
whenever you're
have
ready.
a non-spoiler section here, I definitely want to chat spoilers for sure. And
Yeah.
but we could go for non-spoilers a little longer. But like there's a certain coherence to the world building, which is really cool too. They're like with little things like vines, and like how different mammal type creatures also have like vine like appendages that they control. Like there's a certain coherence to the world building which I don't always see, that just added little flavors here and there and didn't linger on it, but and it takes some time and repetitions to catch on. Like I see the drawings of certain animals, and with so those drawings are great. And
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
just like with the Empire of Salt trilogy by Con Eagledon, like sometimes less world building is more. Like to do it more organically, but to not make a big deal out of it. Like it really worked for me with this, and with Eagledon series, where he does even less. He almost does no world building, but
yeah.
but
Yeah.
Which surprisingly worked for me too.
Yeah.
That's true. I mean, the thing is, like, world building, people always say world building, and they start describing the world itself. But it's like world building is a verb. It's how you're building the world is really like what we're talking about here. So that's how I look at it. Is like, I think taking an understated approach lets you stay closer to the main narrative and closer to the characters, which ultimately can make it more immersive, because like the last thing you want to do is just go like a dump of random world building info which takes someone out of the story which they're meant to be in, right? But then if you're able to again integrate that really tightly into the plot, like you mentioned nature themed animals, they're almost like grass type Pokemon, all of these animals, like, but it kind of ties into the thematic elements of, this was a very environmentally themed series, and then with where the plot goes, it all kind of ties together, which was the intention. So I'm really glad that worked out for you guys.
I don't know how spoilery it would be to discuss the first line of the back of the book. Do you think that's a spoiler?
No,
The very
I don't
top
think
line.
So
I did not read that. I did not read.
I did not read the back of the book.
I did not either. And so you did not make it obvious that the world wasn't spinning.
Yeah.
And which I loved, because when I eventually figured that out, it was like so many things falling into place with like how this world is actually set up and working, and differences in culture and the races and like racial differences, and like so cool that was like at the heart of this kind of ecological world building. Was, there's the sun is at the same point in the sky wherever you are on the map, and that is totally changing everything about the climate and culture and economy, and like, man, that was awesome stuff, and I have not seen that before either, so it just felt fresh to me.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like the characters, of course, they don't know that. To them, like the sun just is always just there. Like that's what it does. It's not meant to move. So how do you convey that in a way to readers that feels organic and natural? So like in this book, I think in the first entire part of it, there's just a lot of descriptions of sunset scenes and trying to like kind of convey it in more subtle ways. Like the sun hung where it always did, like phrases like that. And then at some point, as a writer, I have to say, okay, maybe some readers will have figured it out by now, but I also just have to tell you just to make sure. So then at that point, then we get like a viewpoint from a character who might actually have reason to think about why the sun doesn't move, and then you can kind of explain it more naturally and make sure everyone's on the same page. So it's always a balance of trying to ground readers and describe the world building. And when I look back on these books, it's maybe one thing I could have done better is help readers stay grounded. But that's, when we get around to criticisms, you guys can come around with that. But yeah.
Well, I love that you and I had the same experience with that, Ben, because I was like 70% through. I was pretty far in, and I accidentally saw the back of the book, and I had that kind of oh, what? It was just sitting out, and then I remember you saying something. I'm like, wow, okay, that really tracks, and then it does become it is full on confirmed later, but I felt like it made it so rewarding for those of us that are not back of the book readers. I like to go in blind, and so I appreciated that you didn't just immediately dump that. Like, it's there if you want a summary, because that's a really cool premise. But if you just are diving in, you kind of find, and so that it made it even more rewarding for me, I feel like.
Yeah, well,
totally.
I'm glad it worked out one way or another. Yeah, I mean, if you guys don't have any other spoiler-free thoughts, I'm happy to dive straight into spoilers.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So I mean, like I mentioned to you guys, it's pretty awkward for me to like try and lead this conversation. Ben, I know you're always very, very good at like doing book discussions and stuff. Both of you guys are. So if you guys just like talk, and I'll be like the authorial voice in the background, if that works.
We can. I kind of am curious though first, if you have any kind of thoughts yourself on things you would have liked to have done better or improved upon, or that you think like, oh, next time I would have done this or do better at this. Like, not that you have to have anything in specific, but I'm curious if you do.
I have a lot, to be honest. It's kind of interesting because like whenever I look back on these books, it's like this was written by me, but it's like a different version of me from the past, right? So now it's like I'm writing a new project now. It's very, very different, and it's kind of I open this up sometimes and I think like, huh, I did good there. But a lot of the times I open it up like, why did I phrase it like that? What was I thinking, or whatever. So I mean, it's kind of hard to say definitively what I would do differently because it's like one of the major things is the nonlinear timeline in Riven Earth. I think that's it was a big risk, I think, and it's not something that works for everyone. So it's one of those things where like if I did that again, maybe I could do it differently, but also I would probably not do it again. But at the same time, it's like that's kind of the magic of this book. I think like some people really did like the nonlinear timeline, even though for some people it really threw them out of the story. I think some of the dialogue, the way I wrote it, kind of felt almost too sappy, maybe. Like especially the romantic dialogue. I think I would probably write some of that differently. Some of a lot of like just sentence to sentence stuff, like word to word level stuff, will be quite different. And then, yeah, it would probably be those, I think, for the most part. And then trying to ground readers a little bit better through the first half of the book and trying to make it a little bit more interesting. A lot of people, I feel like for some people it's too slow, and there's some people like Niko who think it was kind of fast.
That's another one of those things where sometimes you have to take my feedback with a grain of salt because my taste is a bit different. But yeah, hearing that somebody's like, "Oh yeah, I found the book slow," I'm like, "How?" Like it's a short book for fantasy that moves very quickly. I've had some other people. Or some other authors too tell me that when I'm like, gosh, this was blazing fast. They're like, gosh, I had some complaints it was too slow. And I'm just like, what do people want? Do you want to just be going down on a hill the entire like? Come on, like you can only go so quickly. So that's always fun for me. But granted, so many of my favorites are the things that people are like, oh, that's unbearably slow. I'm like, yeah, I like it though. It's fine.
Yeah. I think, like I said, probably the biggest thing is the flashback sequences. Some of them maybe I would do differently or try not to remove readers from, I guess, the main story too much for book one. Book two, I feel really good about. Like I wouldn't change too much in book two. I like the way it was structured. I like that it's had. I'd like to think it has like a sense of propulsion towards the end. It kind of picks you up in this wave and like takes you towards the ending. And
the Amerilanche, I loved the structure of book two. That we're following one group who's gone out west into the burning sunlight, found an ancient, interesting, weird.
I guess we're in spoilers now.
City.
I guess.
Oh yeah, very much spoiler. Definitely from hopefully people registered that from before.
Nope. Okay, does that work?
Oops. Yeah,
hey, there we go.
That works.
Nice. Okay, we're good.
But I really connected to book two strongly, where we're following one group out there in the sunlight, then we're going on a mission out in the kind of moonlight, where in the east, and stuff's happening still in the capital and Heartsong, and I thought it was very propulsive, knowing that things were gonna converge in some way or another, and so the way it all led into book two and played out was very satisfying. I probably agree with your self-criticism of just a little bit of the nonlinear storytelling, because there's the King Isaiah, the deceased King Isaiah's kind of flashbacks, which are kind of reading his journal entries or whatever those were, and from his memoir or autobiography. And so we get kind of flashbacks through him, and then there's also other flashbacks with like some of the present day characters, like with Kaido. And so that was definitely a little bit confusing for me, just to feel fully grounded, and so I might agree with you on that one of maybe doing a little bit less on the flashback stuff, but yeah, the overall structure into book 2 and where things led and the plot convergences and lore reveals, like it was so propulsive. Like I adored that whole like final climactic kind of section and the way things played out.
Yeah, I tend to, and I know that that is one of those things that is really divisive, like the nonlinear kind of things. And some people just don't like flashbacks or dual storytelling. For me, it worked, and I feel like you sort of eased into it because it started like the reflections were kind of like epigraphs at first. They were just these little short passages. Then we went into more. I think part of the reason that I liked it though is it was kind of sneaky world building while also developing the plot because we were
Yeah.
finding more about what happened. And so for me, I was always like, oh, I'm getting a glimpse of what this really cool world was like. And so it's another one of those things that I can definitely see where that's not going to work for anyone. And I think sometimes when you're a new author, you're doing your debut and you're just kind of going for it though. I think it works. And there are a lot of things that you did here, and maybe you wouldn't do some of them, but I think it did work, and you made a lot of really bold choices, especially if we're talking with like the ending things as well, and a lot of stuff that was not expected for me. So, and the like, just to jump into the really big spoiler, but with the Hecatites and that whole thing, which was just like it was devastating because. Um, you do have Raya, which that was like one of my very few critiques. I don't know what specifically I wanted, but I wanted a little bit more from Raya. But her arc was very tragic, which is doing everything she possibly can to try to help the people she cares about, and then finding out that all of the slaughter is just pointless and it wasn't going to really save anybody anyway. But it was done in a way that didn't feel like it invalidated it. And I think that's another thing. You towed the line there really well without making it like too over the top, because you very easily could have gone over the top. But for me, it didn't. And so that was just like seeing the way that went. And then Otto and Mercedes were the two. I just did not, I didn't care that much about them in book 1, but I was so invested in their respective plot lines in book 2.
Yeah.
And I love what you did with them. And this is even though I'm not primarily a character reader either. Um, I just with Otto especially, who is just the very and he definitely feels like one of the very Abercrombie kind of style of characters for sure. But seeing him where he's just determined to do what he's going to do, but then the glimpses of humanity and then building on that book too. And in different ways with Mercedes, but kind of the same thing there. I in the first book, I liked the moment where, despite him being like this evil mastermind, he's still human. And like, there's the moment where he feels protective over a child, and you're like, oh, like this dude is awful, but like, look, there's some humanity there. Like, he actually like cares about the well-being of this child to an extent. It doesn't make him better, but the kind of quasi redemption arc, even though he's not the most redeemable character, I think too, is just I think it worked well. It didn't feel forced at any
Yeah.
point for me
Oh,
at all.
totally.
It just, yeah, I was surprised how much you got me to come around on those two characters, to be honest.
Yeah, but I was all in on Otto from the beginning, but Mercedes definitely was not really feeling him until book 2, and then I was so invested. I wanted a full redemption arc for Mercedes. You did something which I don't see that often. Like, I read a lot of modern fantasy. I don't often see an antagonist character having like on the page visible like moral dilemmas or like thinking through like they could go this way or that way, and that they almost choose going like the path of redemption or righteousness and then not. Like, I don't know, you'd think you'd see that more often, but I can't remember just like reading a kind of morally gray antagonist like having that kind of internal dilemma. Maybe I haven't, I forget, but like that felt really fresh for me, and I was rooting for him to choose the path of righteousness. And when he did not, it was just a punch to the gut in a really good way. Like that was like it was tough because it felt like, oh, he was making this deliberate choice to like go with the cynical side of the world, and so that was a gut punch. But I think it took some authorly courage to not have him go the path of good and full redemption. But even if I think it could have worked that way either. Like I think it could have worked either way. But I thought it was really cool. Like we didn't overdo the introspection on it. It was just like the right amount to like
Unlike
really
some
hook me
authors.
into really hook me into the dilemma that he was facing of like, we have seen growth with him. Like, and it felt believable, but not enough to like push him to be a completely new person. And so like it was disappointing in a very like, this Abercrombie-esque, like it does reflect like some of the realistic cynical sides of humanity and the world and the way things go. Not everyone chooses good and or redeems past bad actions. And I know, Niko, you mentioned somewhere that like that Zamar was going for themes, some of the same themes as Abercrombie, but you feel like did them better. Is this sort of one of those things?
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, of course, that's subjective. But that's for me with Abercrombie. I feel like he just goes a little bit over the top, but just kind of his style, and it's just he hits you a little too hard with the sarcasm for me, and that's where like my favorite Abercrombie book is The Heroes, which is almost a fantastic book, almost. But he can't. It's like he can't help himself with the ending, which is beating you over the head with it, and that's just where I'm just like, come on, I wanted to love this book. So I never felt like I was being beat over the head here, and that's some of the themes of just like hopelessness and of like people not changing and just being what they are. I feel like come across really well, and like I am actually quite a cynical person in my real life, and so like with my Sadie's, I was not rooting for him, and I'm like, yeah, I don't trust you, but still, the execution was so good because my favorite little point with my Sadie's, and we're seeing him at such an incredibly low point, and you're like, this is the point where if he's going to try to be better, it's here, and then you see the most dastardly thing where he's arranged to have the heads of children delivered to be like, yep, this is what the king did. And I'm just like, there it is. He's still him because people don't change.
But
But
he's feeling bad about it though, and so
yeah,
like he's not like a mustache twirly kind of
exactly.
villain. Like you see that he's conflicted, that he doesn't like this path that he's kind of started everyone down, and when like he's so angry when like the people under him kind of murder all the government officials in Heartsong. He's like, you murder all the competent people here. We have a plague, and you murdered like the main person in charge of public health. It's like you could see that he's so conflicted, and he's not all bad. Like it's a great, morally great character and a conflicted character, and then watching him try to like out of his guilty conscience like help the princess and Jasmine,
yeah,
and he's like thinking like, oh, he's saved her from being killed, he's trying to do his best to like make up for things, and there she goes and kills him, as and what a brutal scene, by the way. That was like crazy. I'm like, oh my god, I could see where the scene was heading, and I'm like, this is awful. And it was so gritty and violent and brutal, and you're like, oh man, he got what he deserved, but he was like trying to be better, and like it was great. That was, I think, just totally hit for me.
Yeah. But it's who he is. Like he is, and nobody's all bad. I mean, there's no such thing as 100% good or 100% bad in real life. There are the people that even sometimes we like to look at as being 100% evil. But you can find the most sadistic, messed up person, and maybe like they really like dogs or something. There's nobody is 100%, And when you get people like that, you get the mustache twirly villains, which, and again, Mercedes seems like he's going to be at first, but nobody's quite that simple. And that's really, the characters are all very complex. And so seeing arguably the worst guy, if not just simply the worst guy in the series, and seeing that even he's human, even he has moments of doubt or moments where,
Chance.
he's like, is this right? I think it really, really works. And yeah, that scene that you were talking about, Ben, that's just like the high drama as well, where it's like it almost comes off as like vaguely Shakespearean, with just like the dramatic like coming in and like both thinking the other thing, but it worked really well. So it was, I think it was the second one where I'm like, we're getting a little too high drama, but I still enjoyed it. It was that part, yeah, felt very, now that I'm thinking about it, like very something you'd see in some Shakespeare. Like, there's already the dead people here, but then the next party comes in the same spot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm glad that Mercedes at least worked for you guys. He was always, I always thought of him as like a very tragic character, a character with redemption arc cut short, I think is a good way to put it. Like, kind of makes you think, like, if he'd been able to live for longer, would he have found good redemption? And I think there's a decent chance of it. Like, he was probably trying to work with Jasmine and like would have tried to help with the city, but at the same time, once you've made decisions like the ones he made, like, is there redemption you can find? And it's kind of similar to what happens with Raya at the end too, because she made some really bad decisions as well, or some, I guess, controversial decisions, one could say. And so it's kind of funny the amount of people who have messaged me about Mercedes afterwards, and they're like, "Oh, but I still hate him though."
Oh, don't get me wrong, I do, but I found his storyline compelling. So
yeah. You want people to love or hate characters. You want people to feel and be invested and compelled by the characters in the story. So apathy is not what you want as the reader, or I imagine as the author. So yeah, if we're not liking a character, that's a good thing, I think. And
Yeah,
as long
no,
as there
I
are
agree.
probably a few that we like and can root for, but we're like Otto here, he's on a path where it's just like, he's the grizzled war vet, which is a nice trope I love. Gemmel, I've read only a few Gemmel books, but he mines that character archetype a lot, and it's one I really, really love. He's on his last legs, literally, like, he keeps needing to be healed so he doesn't die of his disease, and so like the way that he grits through, his illness to take one more step, like there were some really powerful moments in the writing with Otto where it's just like one more step. He's like stepping through the burning desert, and then when you think he's dead in the desert, like his wonderful loyal Lomer, what was the name of his
Jilly.
Lomer? Jilly.
Jilly?
Oh, Jilly. Like, rescues him, and she's burning up, and she puts him on his back, on her back, and takes him, and like, man, like, what a wonderful moment there of like what you pulled off with some non-sapient animal companions is great. Like, fantasy authors, they make like sapient animal companions like Night Eyes, and like that's like a huge cheat code for making compelling animal companions. But like, I really respect what you're able to do with just like the non-sapient verbal animal companions like Jilly and Ruby, like with very little page time, making me feel like they were, their own beings with their own emotions and motivations and agency in the story, and playing their key little parts. But man, I loved Otto here because he's just like, he stumbles in to the ancient city, finds like, or is it before where he discovers Mercedes, before they trek out there? But like, he finds Mercedes, and like, I love that, like, like, he does not respect Mercedes. He knows him from before, and like, but he has these new cares and concerns with, his daughter, and and then, what he does at the end to get back to Heartsong, and it was very compelling stuff. I loved Otto. I have a soft spot for that, grizzled elder kind of character archetype in the first place, but I think they did a great job with him. It was some compelling stuff on the page.
So the two things I have to say, because first of all, Otto's ending is probably my favorite for all the reasons that you were just talking about, Ben. Because he's the whole book. It's the just a little further. I need to go. I need to keep them from using my daughter and all this kind of stuff. And then to have it at the end, just be like, oh, Kaido has her. Yeah, that's fine. I can die now. He'll take care of it. It's all good. I just like it was like kind of like anticlimactic, but in the perfect way for the character, because you'd established those characters and that is somebody he would find trustworthy. And it's just like, oh yeah, that's fine. And so I just thought that was such the perfect ending, because even though he dies, it's like he feels like his goal succeeded because his daughter is as he sees safe, and so it was such the cherry on top of that arc that is one that I enjoyed much as it went more and more and more. But then, and I won't spoil this because I know you haven't read it yet, Ben. But the whole thing with the Lomer, which I also loved the Lomer and Jilly, but that was the one scene I think where I'm like, this is a little too cheesy for me. The flashback where we're naming, until you read the novella, and then it just is like, yeah, this tracks perfectly, because you get a little bit more of seeing why. I'm being as vague as possible because I don't want to spoil anything, but the novella just kind of made that make sense too, and made it even sadder. Even though that's the coziest storyline in there, but yeah. So it's yeah. That was the thing too. Is yeah. I can't wait to hear what you think of the novella, Ben, because it really is. It's not one of those things where he just says like, "Oh, this is something you should read after." It's like you could read it before, but it's so impactful, and he's able to fit a lot in there because it's very understated, because it's relying on you already knowing who the players are, and that just makes it even more impactful. So just really really good time.
Ooh, nice. Getting me hyped to keep going in the novella.
And there's dinosaurs. Come on, what more do you need? I mean,
there are dinosaurs. So Otto, to just for the sake of trivia, in case you guys were curious, so like this entire duology kind of formed around two scenes in my head, and the first scene was Kaido at the Windern Crag, like after that great big battle where all the Easterners get killed, and he's very sad. So it's like this very sad king. And then the second scene was this old dying man like traversing a desert. And so like those two scenes were stuck in my head, and the entire story kind of formed around those, where it's like, what's wrong with this dying man? Like, what's he trying to do? Like, what's his story, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, and then I don't know, Otto's story for me at least was really emotional. Like writing it, there were like scenes where I was teary-eyed, and like I don't know if I probably maybe shouldn't have been, but yeah, I mean it's a story of fatherhood and loss, and trying to find purpose in life after, like I'm a married guy, so it's imagining going through all that stuff, and so it was tough. So I'm glad that connected with you guys. He's a bit of a favorite actually, and the best thing about him, writing him, like it's just so much fun because he just doesn't give a shit anymore, right? Like he goes to a bar and he gets stopped by these random guards, and then he just farts because like he just had to fart, and like he was feeling surprised when he had to let it out. He meets Mercedes, he just smacks Mercedes on the arm with his cane. Like he doesn't care, he's just done.
Yeah. Well, and as a new dad, some of those parts where he's like first like realizing like, hey, like this is my daughter, too. I see those definitely land harder when you've got a baby at home. So
yeah, I mean, I'm glad they do.
One interesting character I wanted to chat about was Kaido. So this is like a youngish king who hasn't been on the job for too long, and he's kind of like chilling out in his rooms and is kind of like not really doing that much to actively govern at the start of the series. Like I was worried this was gonna fall into like cliche territory. Like you see a lot of in fantasy, just like incompetent, kind of youngish kings, like or evil or sadistic, but like it turns out he's intelligent and competent and caring, and he's going through a rough patch though. It's like it's not something I've seen too often where like it was a seemingly very believable depiction of depression and it still wasn't fully clicking for me though until I knew what he had done in the past that he's feeling like regrets over. And like you see all these flashbacks of him having like a really close relationship with the dryads that he's protected, and I'm like, how did this go bad? And like, what did he do? And then it's like, oh my god, you decided to murder them with your own hand. It's like now I know why he's just destabilized by like guilt and depression. It's like he actually brought a lot on himself and is feeling horrible guilt over it. And once I got the full story by the end of book one, that happens at the end of book one, right? I feel like okay, I'm more grounded in Kaido's character, and then I was just like really compelled by him all through book two, and him kind of taking more active role and undoing the wrongs as he learned more about the world and the way things really are working and what's causing the issues, and him taking responsibility to stop it. And that really worked for me. I struggled with him a little bit in book one, but I think you just got to have patience with it, and it pays off. And it was really not any kind of cliched type of young king character. I really appreciated it. Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to what I said about you take pieces of a lot of tropes, but do them kind of differently. And this definitely has like the second generation, in on the shoulders of giants type of trope, where it's these people coming in and they're inexperienced, but they're trying. Uh, but instead of just having that be like the whole thing and having that be incompetent, you're like, no, like they for the most part they're quite competent, although they have their issues. And like Kaido's definitely an exception, but there's people around him, and you still have some of the old guard around too. But that was where, for me, too, I think the dual storytelling, the way I looked at it, because I also wasn't super invested in Kaido early on, but I'm like, we're doing flashbacks. We're getting more. I'm like, I assumed at some point I'm going to get a flashback that explained that. So, like, it got more benefit of the doubt for me. That, like, okay, there's probably a reason here. And there were the little flashes and hints that, like, something terrible happened. And that the scene with him, and I am completely blanking on the name now, but in the forest where he meets up with the other guy who's in a character in book two.
Farion?
Yes. Okay. I'm like, I'm drawing a blank on the name, but that scene as well is one I think that could have come off as like over the top or cheesy, but for me it didn't. It felt very genuine, where it was just, especially because it was kind of during Kaido's travels, when he's doing like his pilgrimage through all the cities. That's where I started to really like identify with it, like feel for the character a little bit more. Where I'm just like, okay, this guy is really annoying, but he seems like there's reasons he is the way that he is, and he is trying. Like he wants to try, but he's struggling, and so that's where I felt more for him in just like that scene where like he kind of like finds and sees the hurt in someone else, that is his enemy, and like that powerful moment of him changing his mind. It's just another one where it was just, that was a great moment. And then of course there was when he gets attacked by the saber-toothed tiger, which, despite, because Zamar, you pointed out that like it's on the cover. I'm like, I didn't see that coming at all. Like that, I was just like, what just happened? Like I'm just reading, walking through the forest. Like that took me completely off guard for some reason. I didn't even think about the fact that it might happen. So like, I was already like, I'm feeling invested, and then I wasn't sure if you were going to kill him off or not, to be honest, because it could have happened, honestly, and I feel like it would have sort of fit, having a shocking death, but the way it worked, I think, worked really well, and you didn't like you didn't like leave it making you think like it's a fake out death for a while too. You very quickly came back to it, which I appreciated. But just like that, I felt like that was so powerful because it just hit out of nowhere for me. Maybe I should have expected it, but I did not.
Were you expecting it, Ben, or did it catch you off guard?
I think I was expecting that scene at some point. It probably caught me off guard exactly when it happened, but like I like that we started to get exposed to more of the magic there, and like the characters trying to figure it out a little bit, and so like we start to get more of a feel for the magic as the characters do over the course of both books, and it's not until late in book 2 where Kaido's like tapped into Astea, and we really start to know what's going on, but which was very cool. I thought you did like cosmic god type characters in conflict really well, and like that was so cool, and also just to hop around a bit, like so you mentioned the character's name. I forget who was the warrior character that you met.
Varian.
Yeah. I loved his POV in book 2. Like I thought he injected a lot of really great energy, and just giving us like a perspective from someone who is more of a commoner gave a new look into everything. Like we're just like with the soldiers, with the grunts, and almost every other POV is like a royal or someone in like government, and so that injected a nice bit of life and that like a different perspective. And thinking about it now, like we could have probably done with his POV a little bit even in book 1 maybe, and so like we get to know him a little bit, and then when Kaido meets up with him, we have more at stake as the reader in that confrontation. But that was cool. That was a great scene. I love that. I thought Kaido was gonna get murdered right there, and then they come to this cool, just like very human understanding of breaking down their barrier of hatred, or not following through on a cycle of violence and revenge, and which was really touching. And because elsewhere in the series there are characters that just carry out violence and cycles of revenge, and so you show different ways of handling it, and
yeah, I mean that was kind of the intention. And Varian, he's generally kind of just a good guy, I think, for the most part. He was in a bad spot when we met him in book 1, but I think putting him in as a POV character in book 2 felt like a huge risk, because it's like you're introducing a new POV. You don't know how it's gonna go down. But I'm glad I did it, because I think like it was nice to get, like you said, that different perspective. And then like I was also thinking a lot about the battle scenes to come, and like having like an on the ground perspective fighting these crazy dinosaurs. It just felt like really a good way to bring the readers close to the narrative. And then you could do some interesting things with his character growth, and kind of how he changed from where he was in book 1 to he basically met a group of soldiers, and they became like his friends, and they kind of helped pull him back to a happy place. Now they did one by one tragically die, so there's that. But I won't say I was nice to him.
Can't be too happy now.
But yeah, man, you were so brutal. Like in terms of named characters who ended the series alive, like it's very few. And then even the unnamed characters, like a plague is wiping out huge swaths of the population.
Yeah,
and
it's dark.
It seems it feels like the end of the world is possibly upon us, where everything is collapsing, and you have Kaido basically saving everything, bringing us back from the brink. With like, I really love the ecological themes are not heavy-handed, but like the way you set it up, where each of the gods has their like mortal link, and so it's like there's like a delicate balance to the world's ecology, and I loved that, where it's like just destroying that last Hecatite, kitten, like, is a major issue that we don't deal with in the series. But like moving forward, what does that mean that the moon's link is gone and there's no replacement? Or like the fact that like him killing that last dryad child like caused this all, like, it was a really cool illustration of the fragility of an ecosystem or a world's kind of ecology. So that was really cool. I like the subtlety and nuance with the handling of the ecological themes, and it's not something that often pops up in epic fantasy, where that is like a major theme and something that's really important for our current world. And so it made it quite another aspect that made it quite fresh for me. Ooh.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of that idea of like like you said, the fragile ecology of the world, and also just the notion that we rarely know exactly what we're doing when we make changes in the world, right? Like it's very, very easy for us to do negative things without realizing it. Hi Heidi. Very great to see you here, and I hope you enjoy the non-spoiler section.
Heidi, definitely listen to when Zamar says we're going to spoilers, and not when he puts the spoiler. He would not. Don't wait to leave until he puts the spoiler word up. Just because I was very eager to get to spoilers.
Yeah, I think it's all good. It's all good. We didn't go too deep there. Yeah, like so talking about Kaido, he's kind of like the central character of Riven Earth. It's kind of based around his character arc, him finding his way back to the throne, and so that's why we were talking about the flashbacks and stuff, and that's maybe like the one thing which I still debate. I don't know how you guys feel about it. Like, could I have done that differently? Or do you think you would have connected more with Kaido if you had known sooner, like why he was depressed? Because the way I saw it was like I wanted to build a sense of mystery and like allow readers to slowly unravel this mystery of like what is wrong with this king, and like, okay, on one side he's like growing and trying to find his way back to the throne, but then like why was he in that bad place in the first place? And then like for him it was exploring mental health was like a big part of dealing with his character arc and trying to get that right. And then really I think the heart of the story is just the relationship between the three. So Raya, Jasmine, and Kaido, I think, is because it for me a big part of it is just the way that they kind of care for and love each other. But then there's also like, because they have such a long history, there's a lot of like unknown tensions and stuff that we're slowly unraveling and finding out about, and the way that they depend on each other. Like at the end of Riven Earth, like what is the impetus to push Kaido back to the throne? It's when he sees Raya breaking down, right? Because she's always so dependable. But then when her father dies and that affects her deeply, it's him realizing that he's put too much on her. And it's the same thing at the end of Sundered Moon. Like what pushes Jasmine to kind of take control of the city and overcome like all of her insecurities and the things that she was dealing with is Raya dying as well. So I don't know. I'm just rambling some random authorial intent comments, but
absolutely. Well, and yeah, it's I think the characters they work well, and they're all complex, and they all have their different issues, and it's I think the way you write it too, where it's obviously they're varying different issues. Like, obviously depression's a little more serious than vanity, but to the character going through it, that's a really big deal. And like I think that's one of those things that, like with Jasmine, she doesn't have a lot of real problems at first. Like her problem is, oh my gosh, I have a pimple and this is unacceptable. But I mean, to her, that's a huge deal. And you see that hint, hint, when you get a little bit more backstory in a book that Ben hasn't read. I just poking fun at you a little bit. No, it's all good. But I mean, yeah, it's just like all the characters are dealing with something too, and kind of seeing that. And yeah, with Kaido, that's where like I gave the benefit of the doubt that we get more than we did, and even like the ending with Kaido too. Like I love that Astea is just basically like, man, I don't want you. Are you kidding me? Like, come on, there's got to be someone else. And it was like, and I'm obviously oversimplifying it, but I just, even that where it's just like, and he's like, you know what, you get me. That's what it is. And he has to kind of embrace that. Like, I know I'm not that great, but I'm trying again. I'm gonna, do what I got to do what I think it means to be a king. Um, and I think it works. And thematically, because I mean, the themes are strong, but I mentioned really early on that I feel like even though there's a lot of commentary, it never comes off as preachy, and it never comes off as super black and white either. Because like the environmental thing is really big, but I like the fact that despite the fact that we're looking at that, we see that like what the people are doing with trying to like industrialize and coming out from the harsh realities of being under the rules of the dryads. It's not like everything was like some perfect place in a utopia. Like no, I mean there was like human sacrifice required, and there were lots of rules, and they weren't allowed to have stuff. So they see themselves as moving forward, and then like you said, it kind of unintentionally realized they're making everything so much worse. So I like that there was some nuance there. And the other thing we haven't talked a whole lot about yet too, but the exploration of the ideas of worship in kind of religion, which I absolutely love the exploration of religion in fantasy. It's something I'm a big fan of, and some of my favorite series I think do it really well too. And just kind of seeing that too with like the organic growing of religion of the people following the reflections of Isaiah as like a real person. We had the religions following Astea and the Dryads, and following the Sun Touch. We're seeing all of these different like religious movements and the preaching, and how we have some characters that are railing against worship. And like you can read the commentary there of like, oh, this is bad, but then you see like, well, actually though, but the deities are real, and some of this is good. So there's so much nuance with everything, and so it makes it so much fun to explore for me. And I like the ideas exploring and that's where you do we see a lot of the human nature and decisions on the micro level with our POV characters, but also we see a lot of that on the macro level with what happens with people and the masses, and that mob mentality and trying to find something to believe in. So I think you managed to fit quite a lot again into a relatively short series.
Yeah, and with that, like there was this Astea worship, developed out of this kind of like manipulation by Astea and the Dryads to like for the purpose of maintaining the solidity of the link, and like that there would always be this link, but like even that status quo was damaging, and like Astea was not reconciled with the sun god was
Mithras, yeah.
Mithras, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wait, I think you're on mute, Niko, or something.
Oh, I was just saying Mithras in a really dramatic tone.
Mithras, yeah.
But like, so Astea was using religion in like a manipulative way out of self-interest, but then like there was some legitimacy to that religion though still, as Niko was pointing out, but like then Isaiah's coming along and completely outlawing that, and there was this kind of anti-religious crusade that he and like the empire's going on, and that doesn't seem great either. And so like there's just a lot of nuance on all sides of like, yeah, and
Yeah,
it's
and
interesting.
there's like a natural pushback to that, right? To his kind of like the whatever flashback plot of Riven Earth, where the Easterners rebel because they do remember the religion and they believe that we should be worshiping, otherwise we're gonna fuck over the world. And turns out they kind of had a point to a degree.
Yeah, I love how you set up Isaiah through the journal entries or whatever it is. Like, like his voice really comes through. Like that's where you have, I think, the strongest writing voice in here is in Isaiah's in-world writings, and like he is like such a strong-willed, authoritarian, like arrogant, confident, like racist, like it like really comes through, like bringing him to life in not many pages of like through that vivid writing voice that you give to him in World. So really great job on that. And like that's a scary character that you brought to life. But like the way he throws around the like slang invectives, like it really felt believable and organic of like someone who's more of like an older generation style, not very enlightened person with a lot of power and unkind ideas toward people that are or beings that are not like him. So yeah, like really great job bringing him to life.
Do you feel
So,
like
and
I was gonna say, do
oh,
you
go
feel
ahead.
like he had good reason to feel that way, or did you feel like you kind of understood why he felt that way?
So that's kind of where I was going, actually. So that's the perfect segue. But I think so with the racism, you handled that so delicately, but also so really, and that's such a hard thing to do. And it reminds me a little bit another series I've read with an author who did that is Michael R. Fletcher's The Obsidian Path, where there's extreme racism toward Black people because people who, under this like really powerful like king, they summoned demons and like attacked and took over large parts of the world, and it was coming from people who were that race. And so even though they've been overthrown, there's still this powerful hate against them for that reason. You kind of have the here where it's like the sun being as damaging as it is, the fact that they have magic and can harm it. It's just like you can see why it would happen. Doesn't make it right, and you explore that and show why it's still like wrong. But you also that's such a like giving a reason and adding that into the world and into the lore is a bold choice, but I think it's an effective choice. And it challenges you to be like, hey, maybe now you understand why these people feel this way. Doesn't make it right, but like it makes it again more. It adds more nuance and complexity, and that's a hard thing to do when you're writing those kinds of themes in there. Uh, but also seeing all of the different sides of it too, and the different people and kind of where they feel and where they come from. It adds a lot of depth to individual characters as well as kind of the masses as well.
Yeah. Good job on the sap lickers, like invective or whatever the right word is for that, like the kind of like
that's what Isaiah calls people who like the dryads, essentially, right?
Yeah, so like that type of like creative linguistic world building goes a long way, I think, for secondary world type stuff. And so like, man, I think you did a great job with like not overdoing that, but yeah, it brought his voice to life.
Yeah, those things are always such a pain to come up with, though. Yeah, I mean, regarding the untouched people, I think, thanks for saying that, Niko. It's always obviously a delicate thing, so you want to do it justice to it. And then I consider like the main villain of the story is, I guess, Isel, like if there is a main villain. And I kind of consider her to be a bit of a tragedy of racism, right? Like she's kind of driven to this insane madness and like hunger for power just because of the way she's been treated. And then all of a sudden, like these followers start worshiping her, and it kind of gets to her head really fast. And Mercedes, of course, being the snake he is, understands that, and he thinks he can control her, but it turns out that he can't, and he pays the price for that.
Yeah, and it was very believable. Isel's, fall into megalomania and like seeing that, like, oh, people with this magical power, like, yeah, like it is dangerous if they wield it for their own violent ends. But then you see the kids who are growing up are just normal kids with goodness in them, and Isel's foil is what's her name? Zania, yeah, and she's so good-hearted and motherly, and the fact that you have those foils, I think the balances kind of what's going on with Isel in a nice way.
Yeah, and I mean, it says something that like like Zonia uses the magic for healing, which Azelle never does. But then like the people of the world don't even know. Like when Otto is surprised when Zonia starts healing him, he's like, I didn't know that your magic can heal people. Like it's not even known because these Sun-Touched people have been so oppressed. Like they're just killed at birth by the Dryads. So, you know.
Yeah. Well, and I didn't like the scene, but it was a great scene. The quote unquote sex scene between Mercedes and Azelle, where it's just like, again, that's like a personal preference. I'm like, I didn't, it's not my thing, but at the same time, the power shift and the dynamic shift where we see a complete change from where they were in the first book, I thought it was brilliantly done. It really, really was, because like you have the scene in the first one where like he's kind of like lusting after her, and she like is like laughing in his face like, I'd ever want you, and then like having that reverse, and then having that also be after that, after we bring him to his lowest, and then have him still be a snake and go back in. It just, I think it was really powerful the way that you did that too. And it's again, you took a lot of risks. I think in the series, you had a lot of bold choices. I think it ultimately really worked and landed very well.
Yeah, that scene was a risk. Definitely. That's an understatement. But yeah, I mean, it seemed important, or it felt important to keep it in after I wrote it, because like you said, it's just symbolic of that shift in power, right? Like Azelle just literally seizing power, like the way she seized him. And yeah.
By the way, little touches like them, the Sun-Touched using like their sun shields to like migrate across the blazing desert. Like that was a really cool sequence. The way that it like didn't go perfectly, like people were falling outside of the shields, or you know, like the shields were failing at certain points near the end, and like that was really gritty, brutal stuff. But like I really liked how by the end they're using the sun shield magic like in Heartsong to like live normally, and so there's more of this harmony now between all of the different people and forces like living together, which was a really hopeful end. Like there's so much brutal like grim stuff and cynical stuff happening throughout, but in the end it really did land where Kaido is redeeming himself, where Astea is coming around to like, you know, not be as stubborn. And so like on the cosmic level there's more harmony, and then on like the human level it's like everyone almost died out, and now we're moving on and like living together in a little bit more enlightened way. So like it's this really interesting mix of like incredibly grim, brutal stuff is happening. Most of the named characters are dead by the end, and like, but there's still this like overarching hopeful kind of note that we're left with, which I appreciate.
But at the same time, it's also, so because you have that, but then you also have the like, yeah, but they haven't, like, they still have to like move, like the problems are not solved either.
Yeah.
Like they're trending in the right direction, but that's where it's so open to like, you know, in a few more years maybe they're all dead, or in a few more years maybe things are getting better. Like you don't know. It's really
And like,
left
yeah,
like
how
open.
long is Kaido gonna be protected? It's like, okay, if Varian's gonna stick around and like protect him, like, you know, what about when Varian's gone, and like the events that happened fall further back into the past, and then people are like, oh, I don't have to worry anymore about the ecology, everything's good, and it'll happen again. Like, are we gonna get sequels? Are there plans for sequels in the works? Like, there's lots of fertile
sounds like there's
ground.
some potential.
Like, what's the deal with the moon? Like, the moon does not have a link now. It's going crazy. Like, what's the effect of the moon on the world?
But you know,
I demand a 600-page world building focused tome
Yeah, it's kind of interesting though, because the world kind of ends up similar to the way we have our world, where the moon goes from crescent to orb and goes around, and then the sun is moving, and it's more or less normal.
Huh.
Um,
Huh.
but yeah, I mean, I like bittersweet endings, man. I don't know what to tell you. I love it. Did you guys did you guys feel like the epilogue tied everything mostly up? Like I know they were mentioning here how you liked that there were some open endings. Did you feel like there was anything that you wish had been tied up that wasn't, or that you wish that there were answers for that you didn't quite receive, or some emotional something that wasn't resolved?
I mean, for me, I honestly was impressed by how well things were tied up. I did not know how you were going to pull it off because, like I said, I very legitimately assumed this was at least a trilogy, if not longer. And after everything that was set up in book one, and granted, again, I open up book two, and I'm like, this says duology. What? And I'm like, I messaged you. I'm like, this is a duology. I'm like, I thought there's no way. And like book two is a little shorter than book one, even.
It
And
is,
so
yeah.
like I was like, I enjoyed the first book, so you had the benefit of the doubt, but I'm like, I'm concerned. I don't know how he's gonna pull all of these things together. There's a lot happening. So for me, I mean, I think it really did pull together. Like there's some pieces that I would maybe I would have wanted a little bit more here or more there. And like for me, I just think I'm so curious about what's happening, but you did that little bit of a look forward that gives you the bit of closure while leaving things open ended, which I think works. So mostly like I'd be really curious to see like the history of what's happening more, which is the world building guy, of course I would. But that's where like it's the kind of series that even though I've finished it, it still has my imagination just kind of running wild with like picturing like what have things been like, or like when did this happen. And so like that's where like I want to know more about this world, but the actual arcs I think overall worked really well.
Yeah, I do think there's stuff you could do prequel wise with like dryads, because they were very vivid. They were like a pretty unique aspect of your storytelling, where I have not seen similar beings in what I've read. And so like exploring a dryad focused type story would be interesting to see more from their perspectives, and about what happened in the past. So I'm with
I still
Niko.
can't
We could
recommend
do with more
enough.
of that. Ooh.
Both of you should read this series because
Jasmine
it's
from
by Tasha Suri. It's Burning Kingdoms. This is super different, but the sort of nature-based magical deity type of thing is there, and it's immediately what the Dryads kind of reminded me of, even though the execution is, like I said, very different. But this is a super, I think, underrated series. It's not romance. People say it is. It's not. I'll die on that hill.
Yeah, I wanted to check it out after I saw your review.
Yeah, I think you'll appreciate a lot about it.
Nice.
Just because it does some similar, although like I said, very different things. The execution is incredibly different, but just some of those like nature elements. But
Cool.
yeah, I do love the Dryads.
Speaking of romance, there was a very sweet romance in the series. I thought the relationship between Jasmine and Kaido was very sweet natured and organic and believable, and I like that there weren't like contrived manufactured conflicts between the two of them. It's like they both really love each other, and like they're very supportive of each other and understand what the other person's perspective really well. And so like that was pretty refreshing too, because so often there's just like it seems like inorganic levels of misunderstanding between romantic partners in fantasy books, or just conflicts that get in the way of. But here is like, no, their love is pure hearted and very real and sweet, and supportive, and so that was a great kind of relationship at the heart. But it wasn't like taking center stage or anything, because they were apart for a lot of the two books, and so it didn't take up overly too much page time, because maybe too much of that might have gone into cheesy territory. But like we saw when they were together what they were like, and so when they're apart, like they're pining for each other, or they're like hope that the other is okay. It's like it really hits. So great job with that.
Yeah, a really great example of just unconditional love between them too, because that was a really important part of it. Because despite everything Kaido is going through, and then later on when Jasmine is sick too, it's you see both of them willing to do literally anything, and there's no condition that's gonna change that. And so that's you managed to establish what felt like a very like old relationship, which usually you see new relationships. You don't get a lot of established relationships, I feel like, for the most part, in a lot of books I've read at least. So I agree. I think that was good without feeling cheesy, because it just felt like these are just characters that legitimately love each other.
Yeah.
And there wasn't any conflict with Raya having unrequited love for Jasmine. It's like always clear to us, the reader, that like Jasmine views Raya more like a sister and friend, and like is fully in love with Kaido. And it's like, this is not a love triangle. It's just like Raya has long-standing unrequited love. Sucks for her, and she's seems to be not great at hiding it, but somehow like no one else has caught on to it. But
I think Kaido knows about it, actually.
Oh,
yeah.
That's what I was gonna say. I feel like Jasmine is the one who is just oblivious to it.
Yeah.
I feel like there are some hints that other characters kind of know. I feel like, but that
it is realistic
I
too.
agree
think
though.
that,
Never feels like a triangle.
And I probably Raya is the main POV character that I thought like I also felt like wanted something a little more from. Like she was also, I think, at the beginning of book 1, like one of the first POVs mentioned, or like I almost thought that she was going to be the main character of the series, and then Kaido ends up being more of a central character for the whole plot, and so that threw me off a little bit. Raya in the end felt more supplementary and a little bit one-dimensional in like that. Raya's primary motivation is like this unrequited love for Jasmine, and it was like something that just kept on coming up. And so that, if like I know Joe Abercrombie, when he like talks about what he would do differently about the first Law trilogy, it's like, oh, like my female POVs, I had Pharaoh, and like I wish I would have done better with my female POVs. Like clearly he could have done more, and he did with the newer First Law trilogy, of like some female POVs took center stage and were much more multifaceted. And I do think with a lot of your female side characters and Jasmine, even Riot, like they definitely felt fleshed out and 3-dimensional. But I think Raya was the one that felt like just like I wanted something more going on, I think, with her character. But with a multi POV cast that you have, like large multi POV cast, it's like it's almost inevitable that a reader is gonna find a POV or two that are less compelling. But the fact that almost all of the POVs were compelling to me, I think is says great things about your writing of this, because I think it's hard enough to pull off one POV, and so you do so many and with distinctiveness. So
yeah. I mean, Raya was interesting. I feel like for me, like the way she kind of came across to me is just someone who is finding it really hard in life to find a new purpose, I guess. Like she's got this unrequited love for Jasmine, but she's had that for like 5 years. She can't really move on, right? She's doing this job where she's running the kingdom, and she's like hyper competent. So in a way, she's a foil to Kaido. I think that's one of the most important kind of facets to their relationship, is how Kaido's always just insecure. Like he doesn't like that he broke down in front of Raya. It's like, I wish I could have broke down in front of anyone else, but like why in front of her? because she's so competent and like she's able to run the kingdom so well. But then from her perspective, it's like, I don't know what I want to do with my life, and that's why I'm kind of doing this. And she's kind of stuck in her own rut in that sense. And then she tends to get tunnel vision, which is kind of what happened in book 2, where she kind of put the blinders on and like, this is what I need to do, and I'm just gonna get it done. And it ended up being really, really dark and bad, caused a lot of problems, and yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Like there are some people who really connect with Raya, and I think they like that she's generally pretty strong and like she's trying really hard to keep things together. And then there a lot of those people, it's always interesting to see how they feel about her at the end of book 2, where some of them are like, oh yeah, she did everything right, she was justified, and then others are like, no, I don't like her anymore. So but yeah, I mean, I totally get it. Like there's a big cast of POVs, and like not every character is going to hit for everyone. So
But I feel like for me, Raya was the first character that pulled me in, because I mean, she is quite the introduction, where she, is exposing Mercedes' corruption and slices off his hand with the fire sword. Like that's quite the introduction to a character. And so like immediately I'm like, yeah, her. Let's read more about her. And I was very invested. And then for me, I think partially it's just the story went a little bit of a different way, and the characters, like the POVs, Kaido and Mercedes and Otto, I was more invested in those in book 2. And so it did feel like it still worked. And I think with Raya too, is part of it is, and you commented too, with Kaido kind of realizing he's left too much on her and trying to take back over. I feel like in a way that makes her regress, but in a realistic way, because she's like, okay, I finally don't have all of this on me. I can just kind of go back to just focusing on a goal and kind of having the tunnel vision. So I feel like that it makes sense. So it's one of those things where like I wanted more for her too. I feel like I don't know what, but I wanted more for her, but I also feel like character wise it makes sense what ended up happening. But
yeah.
when really like, because that's one of my only complaints. Like, and my other complaint was you using the word bougie, which is a pretty minor complaint. All things considered.
No, I think that one's fair. But Raya did have a cool fight scene at the end with his L.
Oh yeah.
It's pretty
Oh,
badass.
she was totally badass as a fighter, and I always love those types of characters in action. It was, while believable that she would have the tunnel vision to like get as many cures as possible, kill the cats, like it didn't feel satisfying to me. That part where she was just like, she never realized that this was the wrong move, or to even stop at the very end with like at least saving the kittens. It's like she did save the kittens at first, and then she's like, each kitten like is 2 cures, or like I don't like that. Yeah, like you're saying, the regression almost is interesting. I don't know that she came alive enough for me where that felt fully organic. Because like she did come from a place of being really competent and intelligent and rational, and so
Yeah.
but it's believable that some people regress. Like it's not like, so it's not that it's not believable. And it was an interesting, bold choice to have her do something so unlikable like that. So like,
Yeah.
I might just be responding to the unlikability of her killing all the cats.
Which is fair.
But
It's very fair.
I mean, she has like a Darth Vader moment and stuff. Like so much of this is execution, right? Like some of it maybe I just didn't quite do something right, that didn't quite click, or maybe it was like one particular scene which like you weren't in the right mood for. But the way I see it is like from the prologue, it's kind of scripted where Azula is like gets captured by Raya and Kaido in that moment, and she's terrified of Raya, and she thinks to herself like, this woman, like she's got death in her eyes, she will like kill me and kill the baby, and she won't even blink at it. And that's like kind of this thing which is a bit more subtle, because you don't see Raya from the perspective of people she doesn't love, right? So it's like you always see her from Kaido and Jasmine's perspective, but she's actually like pretty damn brutal, and like she's the kind of character like you don't want to be on her bad side. You kind of saw that with what happened to Mercedes. Like he didn't get a trial or anything, so maybe he was a little bit justified in his little like conquest of the kingdom. But
and that's an interesting character type. Like it's also believable that someone who is like fiercely loyal and loving to those like in their inner circle, and then just like not really caring about people outside that, or more just in like an abstract, pragmatic way. So yeah,
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
And like she kind of has she was meant to have like a opposite arc to Mercedes, or kind of go towards a dark side kind of arc a little bit. But I mean, at the end of the day, like she, saved Kaido, so she wasn't completely bad, I guess.
I am now picturing her as Hayden Christensen, though. Not just the men, but the women and the children.
I have a question for you, since we have the author on the line. It's like quite an opportunity to ask about writing choices. Did you calibrate the kind of formality or the modern feel of the prose or dialogue in a certain way, or was that intentional? It feels like the world, because I saw Tori's comments about like loving the prologue and then like having trouble with like we jump ahead in time and it feels very modern, and the dialogue felt modern, and I didn't really stumble over that, like, because like with Abercrombie, if the secondary world feels somewhat close to our like modern civilization, like if it's not like medieval, or like, I feel like having more modern sounding dialogue and prose like feels natural. And so I'm just curious if you gave thought to it, of like wanting to give it a more archaic feel at all, and you decided against that, or I'm curious if you gave a lot of thought to like the modernity and the sound of the language.
Yeah, I mean, I did. I thought about it a lot. Thought about basically most word choices throughout the book, and I mean, a big part of it is kind of just my natural writing style. I just felt more comfortable doing this, and like I know that's kind of a cop out, but like my debut novel, kind of just trying to get through the book. So it felt like if I put on that archaic voice, I didn't know if I could maintain it well throughout the course of an entire novel, right? And it's like the last thing you want to do is be inconsistent with that kind of thing. So if you're able to like maintain it well, then maybe it would have worked really well. But at the same time, I wanted to like kind of embody each character's voice individually. So like I think Isaiah tends to have a little bit more of that like grandeur and that kind of kingly voice. But I didn't want to give too much of that to Kaido, Jasmine, and Raya, because it felt a little bit out of place. It didn't feel like it fit in with the way that they don't really know what they're doing, and they're kind of just trying to like run things together. And then like Otto's got a very like he's very rough, like rough around, just kind of to the way he talks and stuff. So yeah, like just trying to embody each character individually was a big part of it. But yeah, like I mean, Tori's comments also make sense. Like I think there's a little bit of dissonance with maybe what you're expecting when you have like swords and stuff. Even though it's an alternate world, you might be expecting more of that kind of prose style. But this kind of style, I think, is also reasonably common in modern fantasy. So yeah, I don't know where you strike the balance.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I usually have a much bigger problem with that. And like I joked, I mean, like the use of the word bougie, that was the one that kind of got me. And it's one of those things, I battle with myself on it, because I get both sides of it. Because there are people who say like, what does it matter? It's fantasy. It's not the real world. They can talk however the author thinks they should talk. But there's also part of me that just terms like that, if it's like a specific our world term that wouldn't make sense, it does break immersion for me sometimes.
Yeah.
And so this was a bit more modern to my taste, but I think part of it was I was just reading this as I'm reading a modern grimdark novel. That's sort of to be expected, that's the style. If I'm reading more of a classic fantasy style novel and it's doing that while also trying to be classic fantasy, that's going to clash a little bit more for me in my head. So
yeah,
that's
like
another
Wind and Truth,
thing.
like Wind and Truth, maybe, like,
yeah,
especially the inconsistency. So like Zamar mentioned inconsistency with the word choices, where it's like for a lot of the series, if you're in more of an archaic style and then you start throwing in more modernisms, Like that's
Much worse.
like
That's
yeah,
That, that I think is the worst thing you can do. And like essentially a big part of the reason why these are written the way they are is because I was scared of doing that, right? So
It's
yeah.
just fair. I think it's much worse to start like getting into it because which with that particular book was a big problem for me too. But that's where I do sometimes struggle with it. But I feel like part of it's the presentation, and this also feels like it's a world that's it's a lot closer to our world than you would realize at the beginning. It's like our world if uh, there was some sort of cataclysm that happened, and then there was forced lack of, innovation happening for a while. The people starting to innovate, but it's like, especially seeing that, the people who lived in the desert had pretty modern technology, in some ways, and with magic doing some other things as well too. But just kind of like seeing the glimpses there too, it felt like this. Okay, maybe this is a little closer to our world, but that's something that I feel like it's in general, as a rule, I prefer the more quote unquote archaic or fantasy style type of word choice dialogue, that type of thing. But it also just depends how good of a job you do as an author. I feel like that's kind of a mean way to say it for ones that I don't like. But if you do a good enough job, and I'm invested enough, I'm just not going to care as much, and that's kind of the way it is. And that was here. There was enough that I was very interested and invested in that I just didn't care that much. Whereas I've read plenty of books where I complained a lot more because there wasn't enough going on that was investing me, and so it makes my brain latch onto those things a lot more. So
Mhm.
it's a choice, and I think I commented too. The fast pace, the kind of modern language, the style, a lot of those things I think will work really well for a lot of people. They work less well for me. I would have rathered if you did archaic and it was 600 pages and it was like 4 books. Like that's what I want. But I'm not the average fantasy reader. I'm a lot more niche, as evidenced by the books that I tend to enjoy. So like you shouldn't be trying to sell books to me. Like it's a bonus if I like them, but you're not gonna find a wide audience if you're tailoring your stuff to me.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, like I adore that kind of writing. Like it's maybe like my favorite kind of writing. But it's also like I mentioned before, where the author that wrote these books is a little bit different to the author I am now. Like I've read a lot of books since I read these. I feel differently about prose and language choices. When I wrote these, like from a prose perspective, I was just really, really inspired by Abercrombie. Like you guys know, obviously I love Abercrombie for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is his prose. And like Abercrombie doesn't use like an archaic style, but he just has like he just has clever use of language, and he writes in a very punchy, evocative way. Like when he, on the rare occasion he writes like a descriptive passage, it's like a really evocative descriptive passage. So that's kind of the way that I approached it. Was like, okay, yes, maybe I won't be able to get into that archaic flowery language as much, but I wanted to at least like be visually stunning, like if I'm putting down
Yeah.
some descriptions and stuff.
Yeah. And I think you accomplished the Abercrombie style prose really well. And like I've moved away from that, I think, more towards appreciating a bit more archaic or flowery prose, like not overly so, like maybe not the Tad Williams Dragonbone Chair level, but like GGK, like Guy Gabriel K style prose, where it's like
Niko's dead.
some, very like that's not. Maybe I will grow to love that too over time. The more I spend with it, but like Guy Gabriel K, like I don't know if you'd read him by the time you had written these things, but knowing how much you appreciate like Guy Gabriel K's use of language, and like I'd love to see you attempt more of that style in the future, to like see what, like knowing like how careful and thoughtful you could be with language, that like, ooh, I want to see if Zamar like goes for that type of like prose styling. Would be really cool.
Yeah. I mean,
I can't even like really be mad about the Ted Williams hate. Literally the last live stream I was on was as a Tad Williams and Memory Sharon Thorne lover, I was invited onto a live stream to try to talk a whole group of people from DNFing book 2 because they were really struggling. So
Oh, no.
it's not for everyone. I totally get it.
But
Like I said,
but he's incredible. Like I was like, he's writing that in like the 80s, like, and to pull off the consistency of that style, like it feels so consistent and not like overly flowery too. It's just like, wow, this is really considered over so many pages, and it gives you that more archaic feel, but still by not being overly dense. But so it's good. I think the prose is one of the highlights of the Dragonbone Share and that series. But I would be really curious because I know Zamar has it in him in terms of like the appreciation for more, more like, I don't want to say flowery. What's the word? Like
elevated style.
Elevated
style.
Yeah,
elevated. Like a little Hobbyian, a little GGK-ian type of elevation where it's not like, it's still modern sounding, but there's a bit of an elevation where you're appreciating on a sentence by sentence level of like, ooh, that was a really interesting image, or this is a little abstract and it's a little symbolic, like maybe not the whole way through, but here and there, like they really can dazzle with their prose choices.
I know.
And
it sucks because like I'm always such a prose snob that I'm reading. I'm always criticizing books for crappy prose, but like prose is one of the hardest things, guys. So it's one of those things where I know that I have a lot to grow insofar as craft and prose is concerned, for sure.
But it wasn't the style you were going for here, so it's not something. I think you were consistent with the style here, and it worked. It worked for Niko and I, and or me, I should say, talking about prose choices, and and so this was great. I'm gonna have to get to bed here soon. Mark's gonna be angry at me, so for staying up too late. But yeah, this was a blast getting to chat with you all about these.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys had like a minute or two, if I could ask you two quick questions.
Ooh,
so,
go for it.
First question: if you guys had to pick one single scene that stood out above the rest, what was your favorite scene across both books?
I mean, I've already mentioned it, but it's probably the case. It's Otto, I think, in the desert, the sun, just beating down on him, just like not giving up and taking one more step and keeping on going. Like that stands out to me as far as like probably the biggest emotional jolt or impact I had in the series. So being with Otto out there in the desert.
It's so tough. I did specifically talk about Otto's final thoughts, which was a highlight for me because it just felt so perfect. But there's also, like I said, the scene with with Kaido in the forest on the first one stands out in a big way, just because it really took me off guard. Yeah, that one. I still feel so dumb for not having seen it coming, but for whatever reason, I just did not see it coming at all, which made it good. But and then like in book 2 as well, where you have after all of the slaughtering the Hecatites, and then it's like, all right, here come now the behemoths coming. And everything's so much worse, was also like just such a like horribly tragic and yet like awesome scenes. So those are a few.
Oh yeah, okay. I gotta also give kudos to the giant climactic action sequence out there where there's like velociraptors just tearing into soldiers.
I mean,
and like,
come on.
And then if that wasn't bad enough, then this pack of T-Rex like things is coming for them. I'm like, oh my god, we haven't beaten these humans down enough. But like Astea calling all of like her creatures to go fight the dinosaurs, like great animalistic action scene going on.
Yeah.
That was
Nice.
great stuff. That went big. I love it. I love it when sequences and authors go big, and especially with big climactic sequences. So
Nice. Nice. Nailed it. Okay. Final question then. If you guys were to leave me as a humble debut author with, let's say, your greatest tip as readers who read my series, like what would you say is the thing that I should really focus on for my next books and something I can improve? We already talked about a few things, but I'm kind of curious if you'd have me with like one thing to take away from it.
But it's so hard because my advice is going to be really bad for your career if you want to be marketable.
600-page world building.
I was gonna say, but I will just say, I feel like you did a really good job of staying true to yourself and writing what you want to write. But you also, just from having that conversation with you, I mean, here and just otherwise too, you're very open and accepting of feedback and trying to improve. So just my suggestion would be, keep in mind that, as an author, you should always be improving, refining, but don't lose who you are either, because sometimes you'll see an author who's really trying to like pander to a specific group or crowd, or they're trying to write what they think is marketable instead of what they want to write. And I think it's more important that, yeah, of course you want to write something people are going to enjoy, but also you want to write what speaks to you, which to me at least comes through here with you doing a lot of different things, uh, and making a lot of bold choices because it's kind of what you want. So, always, of course, there's always room to improve and to take feedback, but also just, staying true to who you are, I think is important too.
That's such a touching message.
yeah, I almost feel the same thing. Like, based on our particular subjective preference, like, oh, I would have liked if you would have done this more, you would have fleshed out this more, like wouldn't have done this, but like, that would have made a different book and a different series and not as true to your vision. So like I could say like, oh, maybe in a book one, I like to feel a little bit more grounded in the setting and the characters and like be able to be situated and like, but then again, Steven Erikson made a whole career based on, not doing that in Gardens of the
It's
Moon.
true.
Like, yeah, it's going to turn a large percentage of the readers off. And it's like different than most like fantasy or book ones or more accessible stuff. But like, it's by leaning into his vision, like he made something so singular and unique and different. And like, that's in the end a great thing. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think it would be more just like keep like executing on your vision, and if it's doing it in the same pro style as this, and great. If it's trying to change to a different pro style or more linear storytelling, great. But like, yeah, I guess I'm with Niko where like it's like there's probably always little things others can improve at, but on a prose level or on a character depth level or coherence level or just but like you do so many great things of like building these distinctive voices and characters and an interlocking jigsaw kind of plot with amazing reveals and really cool setting work and world building. So it's like all the ingredients are here that it's so I have difficulty. I have difficulty leaving you with like one tip.
No, that's fair. I'm sorry for putting you guys on the spot, but I do appreciate the kind words. And also really appreciate that you guys read my books and joined me on this Tuesday evening. This has been an absolute pleasure, guys. You guys, I've been like grinning this entire time because it's so cool to see my friends talk about my books. And yeah, I hope we can, Ben, you and we need to sync up once I read Senlin. And Niko, once you continue with the bone chips, I want to hear everything. So
I need to read Senlin too.
It's really cool to have such a talented friend too. Like I am just not capable of producing something like this. Like you just have my awe and wonder that you're able to produce this, but hopefully more interesting things to come too out of that creative brain of yours. So, and you have messages worth getting out there, and where a sensibility and I think that is worthwhile for people to experience. So yeah, definitely
so
a worthwhile time.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, I mean, if you guys don't have anything else, I'm going to end the stream there. It's just about 2 hours. So great. Thank you, guys. If you end up somehow watching this all the way, I don't think there will be many of you, but I appreciate it so much. And yeah, you guys have a great time. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank
Maybe
you.
Esme. Hello,
Yeah,
Esme.
yeah, maybe. Hi, Esme. All right. End the stream.